Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. My internet has gone down again in my house, so I've had to go to my parents' house. They've come to the rescue. It means I won't be able to produce an extra video today, I don't think. But anyway, here's a Frontline update. What's been happening overnight? Well, actually, overnight, a few interesting bits and pieces in terms of Russia producing some hits with drones, particularly. Here is a count of the drones downed. OSINT Technical brings out the normal sort of infographic, says 10 downed, and then goes on to say actually there's 11. In fact, as far as I know, the latest is 13 drones were sent over, Shahed drones again. It seems that Russia's got another package of them, so they are sending them over. The great news for Ukraine is that it looks like 100% of them were shot down. So that's really good news. Let's have a look at the figures that Ukraine have produced for Russian losses. We have a big uptick in liquidated personnel, so 740, and that probably takes into account, I would have thought, maybe the Melitopol and Kharkivka HQ hits and accumulated troop hits. 4 tanks, 7 APCs, 13 vehicles and fuel tanks. That's a big uptick there. Wonder what's responsible for that. And one piece of special equipment. No drones there because obviously this is compiled before the drones have hit, because they are still possibly even taking place as I record this. Not sure, but certainly very recent. Just a little bit from the UK Defence Ministry and Defence Intelligence saying that Igor Girkin, who I've talked about before, is causing a bit of an upset in Russia. He's writing a bunch of stuff that's stirring. Well, he's really kicked the hornet's nest, I guess, because he was positioned in the Russian forces for 2 months before kind of being let go, if you like. Found he didn't really have the paperwork and whatnot, because I think he volunteered, and then I don't know that they particularly wanted him there. Anyway, he's gone back and had a right go at the hierarchy and being very public at his discontent with the way that the whole campaign is being orchestrated. And that damning indictment is obviously not pleasing people in the Kremlin, but on the other hand, he's a pretty prominent military blogger and has other military bloggers that agree with him, and so therefore the end result is that he has caused a bunch of problems. Okay, as we go on just a little bit, Russians have claimed that they shot down 2 MiG-29s. I could have reported this yesterday. Not really sure about whether this is definitely still true, but certainly the claims are 2 MiG-29s and 2 Mi-8s as well. So this is down in the southern regions around Zaporizhia. So basically around about there and there, 2 MiG-29s, one around Pavlivka. That's according to the Russians. Don't know anything else about that from the Ukrainian point of view. If they have lost those 2 MiG-29s, then it's probably pretty good news that Slovakia are now ready to transfer their MiG-29 fighters. I don't know whether there's an agreement to have their own Air Force backfilled with NATO craft, but preparations for this may begin in the coming weeks ahead of the country's the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Rastislav Kachir, has said. So that could comprise a dozen jets. That'd be massively useful for the Ukrainians. Just a little bit here. I'm going to play you. This is from a Times Radio interview. It could be huge.
And you're reporting on Britain's role on the ground in Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right. It's an interesting story, which is about the Royal Marines and their involvement in Ukraine. So we were kind of aware that the Royal Marines had helped to evacuate the British embassy in Kiev just before the invasion, and then helped set it back up again in April to sort of guard it when British diplomats went back in after the Russians withdrew from Kiev. But now Robert McGowan, who is a former commandant of the Royal Marines, he's sort of written in the Globe and Laurel, which is their in-house magazine, about their involvement in discrete operations in Ukraine as well. So it's the first acknowledgement really on the record we've had from a senior military figure about British involvement on the ground in Ukraine, which is quite something.
I mean, it's a bit risky, this, isn't it? Because obviously, if Russia views this as sort of British involvement on the ground, that could lead to an escalation.
Well, the army, the armed forces sort of stress that this isn't a kinetic involvement. That, to you and me, that means essentially British troops involved in actual fighting.
Yeah.
But you know, this word itself, you know, special operations, discrete operations. This is it hints at something that hasn't been formally acknowledged before, which, like you say, could be interpreted by Moscow as something of an escalation.
So that's really huge news that the British forces have been involved on the ground, if not in kinetic operations, then in some capacity in Ukraine. And that could, I mean, the Kremlin could absolutely jump on that and call that massive escalation. The thing with Russia, the question is always, well, where do they go? If that is massive escalation, how do Russia escalate here? Because all they have, as I keep saying, either more troops, well, they're doing that, like they're mobilizing anyway. So it's not like they're going to suddenly mobilize some more. They're pretty much maxing out on that as far as trying to balance public discontent, or chemical weapons or nuclear weapons. I mean, that's all they've got. So, and if they're not prepared to go nuclear, then really it should be a game of brinkmanship now. And maybe that's why the British forces have allowed this to get out, because I can't imagine that you would have written that without getting permission. So is this a case of pushing the envelope? Is this just pushing it more and more and more? You know, the MiG-29s. Yeah, let's give them some MiGs. Let's see what Russia say. Okay, they're not going to do nuclear. Let's push. Okay, they're not going to do nuclear. Let's push. And this is where, you know, hopefully long-range missiles. I'm going to talk about Patriots being sanctioned as well, but just before we get there, okay. Talked about Avdivka already. I mentioned it today. This is the base that was hit, that they said maybe 200 people were killed or wounded. Now Ukraine is saying 60 killed, 100 wounded. So that's still a huge number, and that could represent some of the uptick in today's figures. That's the HIMARS strike on a hotel resort complex in Melitopol. So this one was Avdivka. This was the other one that happened on the same night in Melitopol. Hit a drunken party of the entire command of the 58th Russian Army, North Ossetia, effectively wiping them out. That could have been a really crucial hit. And that's a kind of intel that Ukraine seem to have that Russia don't often have, or at least we don't hear about it as much. And so Ukraine can hit these crucial targets in a way that Russia is unable to do, particularly because obviously Russia don't seem to have HIMARS or an equivalent. They've got no answer to it. So US is now finalizing plans to send Patriot missile defense systems to Ukraine. This is massive. Loads of people have been talking about this for ages. And now, again, is it pushing the envelope? Is it the US going, yeah, might as well, let's do it? You know, we've got to somehow wrap this up. And I would say next. So, okay, they're going to send Patriot missiles. So again, a group of Ukrainian military is reportedly completing their training. This is where often when you hear that they are going to give something, they had already decided that like 2 weeks before, maybe even further before. But when they announce it, it means that the equipment is either there or on the way there. Right. And here they've announced it, but they've actually been training the Ukrainian military on it, reportedly completing their training in managing the Patriot air defense system, which is one of the best in the world. You know, it's been a stalwart of the US defenses for years, at the Greifenwehr training center in Bavaria. So obviously the transporter complexes will be synchronized with the release of the group at the end of 2022. How many of these systems? Don't know what the exact makeup is. But at the same time, the SAMP-T air defense system made by France and Italy will be given to Ukraine. So I've already said this before, but now I think France is saying, anyway, this is definitely going ahead. And this is huge because it's one of the best air defense systems in the world. Battery holds 4 launchers, each with 8 Astra missiles, and they can fly up to 4.5 Mach, reach an altitude of 20 kilometers and a range of 120 kilometers. That is, again, you put that together with the Patriot and the air defense systems is looking good. And you start looking at, okay, the drones that went over today, if that's true, 100% of them were taken down is a massive success rate. And they're probably using not as high tech stuff as this. I don't know. Actually, there might have been a mix of Gepard and other stuff with this kind of missile system, Nazans. That we know they've got a few of them, and a bunch of other stuff. But either way, their air defense capabilities has got to a point where now the next thing isn't probably going to be air defenses, although we need to keep giving them missiles and keep that ticking over, but it's going to be things like long range missiles. You could talk about main battle tanks. I don't think that'll make the blindest bit of difference. If you gave them 20 Leopards from Germany or Abrams or whatever, like a bunch of main battle tanks, yeah, that would be significant on a small scale somewhere, like Pisky or somewhere, like put a bunch of those tanks in, might have a bit of a competitive advantage in Pisky. But it's not a game changer. So my opinion of giving them a bunch of NATO tanks is like, yeah, it's better than not having them. But I'd much rather see long range missiles, long range offensive missiles that can take out any single target and more of them and more launchers, so that they are just continually every night taking out long range targets and then taking them out in Russia. That to me is the answer. Anyway, there you go. So lots of news. Sorry, it's taken me a long time to get on to any other stuff, which is any other stuff being the front lines. So as we come to the northeast, we're going to look at the Kupiansk-Svatove-Kreminna front line, which is down here. Really not a lot to report. A lot of repelled attacks. The Russians attacking, and this is, I suppose, something of a change from the week before, is that the Russians seem to be attacking. The Ukrainians are repelling attacks. Stena-Makivka. I haven't heard anything up about what's going up around here, near Liman-Pershi and around Tevelzhanka, particularly. But yeah, the same old news of repelled attacks elsewhere. Russians have shelled a lot of places: Kupiansk, Kislivka, Kotlyarivka, Tabivka, Berestova, Stella-Makivka, and Myashorevjivka. Fighting reported north of Kuzumivka, and Russians for the second day in a row report that the Ukrainians are conducting offensive operations to Kolomychika. So there you have it. That's a lot of shelling around Kislivka, Kotlyarivka, and around there. And then the Ukrainians are very sort of rare at the moment, counterattack or attack around here, Kolomychika. But other than that, it's all about the Russians, and the Ukrainians are repelling counterattacks all the way down sort of towards Terny and Pavlivka. So again, around here, Chervonopopivka seems to be a little bit of a stalemate at the moment. No report says Russia shelled again other places: Kharkivka, Ploshchanka, Nevska, Terny, and Pavlivka. Silence from the Russians, which usually means they are losing. I wouldn't be so sure. I think that they are actually, sort of pinning the Ukrainians back. How sustainable that is, of course, is a whole different question. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear the truth of Kreminna. Some towns are under full Ukrainian control tomorrow. So, and he thinks south of Kreminna, put a clock there, just a ticking time bomb before. I think he's confident that Kreminna could be under some pressure. Defmon goes a bit south here. The Ukrainians have repulsed attacks around Bilorivka and the Verkhnokamianska. These are important for Ukraine to hold because of their offensive on Kreminna, which would get a lot harder if they lost ground along the Seversky Donetsk River. Absolutely correct there. And then further up, it just talks about it appears that Russian activity is increasing in this area. I think the Ukrainian forces still have the upper hand here, but the weather prevents any serious attempts. There was a short cold streak last week, and I think it resulted in Ukrainian progress around Chervonopopivka. So is that trying to paint it in a more positive light, that it could be that the rain has come back, it's started to get really muddy again? I've seen some images of actually really muddy IFVs infantry fighting vehicles trying to wade through really thick mud, and it's really difficult going, and that actually does genuinely slow maneuvers. Or is it the fact that Russia have picked up their kind of offensive maneuvers around here to try and hit Ukraine back. Kreminna seems to be, there's just all this talk that Ukrainians are inching closer to Kreminna, but as Defmon says, if they don't, withstand the Russian attacks around Pavlivka and just south of that in Verkhono-Makianska, said that incorrectly, then of course this leaves them completely weak from the rear, and so any kind of move towards Kreminna is kind of undone by attack from the rear. Anyway, let's move down to Bakhmut, because there's quite a bit to say about Bakhmut, and it's not all great for the Ukrainians. Okay, let's give you a couple of synopses from my regular pro-Ukrainian sources. This is from NEL Report saying, this morning Russian forces reportedly broke through a line of defense east of Bakhmut. I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. Entering 2 blocks in the suburbs. Not much later, Ukrainians reported countermeasures and that the threat was dealt with. Waiting for more information. Fighting reported in Soledar. Attacks south of Bakhmut near Opitny and Ivanograd keep coming. The Ukrainians hold there. Russians are stuck near Kupiansk and seem not to prioritize this axis of attack anymore. Focus has shifted east of Bakhmut and towards Pidorodny. Ukrainians reported fighting near Mayorsk. And Defmon says that increased intensity in attacks by the Russian forces in the whole area. They attacked Yakovlivka, which they'd already claimed they'd captured, Soledar, Bakhmut, and Bakhmutsk, which they'd already claimed they'd captured. This is obviously previously. These attacks were repulsed by the AFU. Okay, so what has happened is, yes, there are all these attacks. Yakovlivka, not really sure about Yakovlivka. This is a deep state interpretation, deep state map, which is a pro-Ukrainian map. Remember, the Russians said they've captured Yakovlivka, cleared it out. I've just copied what the deep state has done there, but I actually think that Russia probably have much more of Yakovlivka, and Ukrainians probably have a foothold. There is still, all Russian sources basically say that Yakovlivka is under Russian control. So I'm just letting you know that that's probably inaccurate, but I'm going to keep it there until I've got, a variety of sources, from both sides that confirm the same thing. But when we come down Soledar, fierce fighting in Soledar still, but it's all around sort of Pidorodny down to Opitny, really. So where should we start? Well, fighting in and around Pidorodny, that's going to be the place to one of the places to look at, but not the only place, because it appears that the Russians are attacking fully on the east. So I'm actually going to come a little bit further down and say, okay, there's this cement factory here, the Siniats cement factory, and there's a winery over here, and there's claims that the Russians have taken the cement factory and the winery possibly as well, if that's a winery. It says art winery there. There's like the champagne winery in Bakhmut. I presume that's it, but this is this kind of attack down Patrice Lumumby Street that the Ukrainians have been doing, and they've been inching forward. They could be as far as here now, over this kind of, or next to this sort of lake area, but certainly at the cement factory there. And then they've moved into the suburbs. So this is the Zabakhmutka area, and there are a couple of streets into there, Persia Travnevi Avenue, I think that is, or something along those lines. And there is fighting here. And so they've broken through the first line of defense of the Ukrainians here into the suburbs. And they seem to have done that, I don't want to say easily. Nothing's been easy for either side here. But I wasn't expecting that to happen as quickly, this whole advance in the east, because I just didn't think they'd do a full frontal assault on Bakhmut. I just think that's going to grind so much of their forces down that surely they would just keep hammering away at Pidorodny, Soledar, and then down south. But some of the people are saying they've as you just heard from those sources I just mentioned, Kupiansk, they don't seem to be concentrating so much down here. And yet you think surely that it should be south and north. But no, it's the east, and actually they're making some headway. So this is a worry in that part. There's also a worry near the garbage dump and the waste sort of sorting plant here. Then they've made a little bit of a movement to the west from there up to this sort of lake area, and then there's Opitny. So apparently, some Russian sources are claiming that 90% of Opitny is now in Russian hands. I don't have that from Ukrainian sources, but there is heavy fighting there, no doubt. Here the ISW say a Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian troops have established control of 90% of Opitny, 3 kilometers south of Bakhmut. So heavy Ukrainian losses, according to the Russians, and claim that Ukrainian troops are rotating or entirely withdrawing from parts of Bakhmut. Now, we know definitely that Ukrainian troops are rotating around there. So the rotation usually happens if your troops are tired and you're just sort of generally doing your normal rotation, or your troops are getting absolutely hammered and they're taking massive losses. Get them out, get some new ones in. And if that's the latter, then the rotation is actually a sign that Ukrainians are under an awful lot of pressure in the area. So just before I move south, a few other things I want to show you. Here's evidence of this kind of rotation. Ukrainian YPR 765 armored infantry fighting vehicles reportedly in the Bakhmut area. So these are sort of new troops and new bits of equipment. These, I know the Dutch have supplied some of these. They get used by a few different forces, the YPR 765. So anyway, that's just showing that there is kind of rotation and new forces being sent there. Rybar say exactly what I've told you. Russian units established full control over the champagne factory and the Siniat plant to the southeast. There is fighting near the garbage processing plant and the Fedor Makizmienko street. So just to let you know where that is the garbage plant here, and that street they're talking about is this one up there. So it could be that the forces here are pushing to meet with the forces up north there, and then take this all, and you'll have a straight line down to the garbage plant. So that could be what's going on there. And finally, here's what Bakhmut looks like from the other side. So this is Bakhmut from the Russian side. Oops. I'll try that again, shall I? Come on, fingers. Just looks insanely apocalyptic. So that's how tough Bakhmut is. Now, as we zoom out of Bakhmut, I haven't actually heard much more about these attacks around Sumy, towards Toretsk, attacks towards New York and Avdivka. So there's this place, Avdivka, where apparently the Russians are pushing towards. They've been trying to attack New York for absolutely ages. So this whole conversation I had on one of my videos, I did an extra video on on sort of what I thought of the strategy, or it might have been in my Frontline video actually yesterday. So I haven't heard anything about that. Avdivka, there's some news saying that actually the Russians have made some progress towards Pervomaisky, so back from Pisky. So I was telling you about how the Ukrainians have been pushing the Russians back and back and back and back here, maybe as much as 5 kilometers in total, certainly 3 to 4 kilometers. And that was looking really good for the Ukrainians. Well, there's now Russians claiming that they've pushed the Ukrainians back. It's that kind of ebb and flow, isn't it? But there is a little bit more success for the Ukrainians in the Vodyanya area, or at least the Russians are repelling, as according to them, attacks by the Ukrainians in the Vodyanya area. So that is really all there is in the Avdivka sort of axis. When we come down to Marinka, again, normal stuff in Marinka, just hellhole. But the Russians have claimed that they have cut the road connecting Marinka to Krasnohorivka. And Krasnohorivka, again, is this kind of quite important place that, once that goes, you've got a whole area around here, from Pervomaisky to Krasnohorivka that could become quite weak. To cut that road could be quite important. I don't know whether it's this road or the road behind it, because you'd imagine this nearer one is probably under some kind of fire control. Let's see what the Rybar says. Clashes continue in central Marinka. Russian forces took the highway towards Krasnohorivka, cutting off the city's line of supply. And that's also, we've got that in So Russian sources, this is the Institute for the Study of War, sources additionally claim that Russian troops have taken control of the road that runs from Marinka to Krasnohorivka, which they highlighted as a major blow for the Ukrainian grouping in the southwestern outskirts of Donetsk city. Geolocated footage shows that Ukrainian forces have retaken positions east of Druzhny Prospect in central Marinka, suggesting that ground in Marinka's city centre is constantly contested. Russian sources continue to claim that Ukrainian forces are conducting limited counterattacks in the face of Russian advances southwest of Donetsk city in the Vuhledar area, which we'll come to in a second. So that's really interesting. So as you come down here, yes, they might have lost control of that highway, but it seems like to the east of this main road here in the centre, I still have it contested, but the Ukrainians are claiming they've pushed the Russians back there. That's just going to be pretty much like we've seen in Soledar, Bakhmut, areas of Avdivka, just complete, horrible. Anyway, as we come down to our corner down here, as I said, it claims that 2 MiG fighters were shot down in the area. I think Korokhova here was hit possibly by an S-300 missile overnight. Just a little extra bit of news there. And actually, yesterday was a really quiet day. So no activity near Pavlivka, Novomykhailivka, and Velika Novosilka today. There you go. Just not a lot happening. Same for Defmon. And in fact, if you look at Rubar and some of the others, again, clashes continue in central Marinka, but when it comes to Vuhledar sector, Russian forces are fighting on the southwest outskirts of Neskuchna, and that's pretty much all there is to say. Neskuchna was an area yesterday, or would it be the day before now, here, that the Ukrainians were pressuring. So, that could be that the Russians are the Ukrainians are attacking there and the Russians are repelling them. But other than that, no real news. And then we go on to Kherson, which has been, really relatively quiet, Kherson, now for a number of days. No map changes. Russia shelled Chernobivka, Antonivka, Mikilska, Tokarivka, Milove in the Kherson Oblast and the city of Kherson. In fact, Kherson is really having quite a hard time with shelling at the moment. There's a big fire that broke out yesterday. Not really an awful lot else to say about that area. So there you go. That's the full Frontline update. It's all about Bakhmut, really, at the moment, and there seems to be very little movement elsewhere. It could be because of the weather, but it could be because the Russian defences are quite stiff, particularly along the Kupiansk-Svatove-Kreminna front line, although Kreminna could be the weak point for the Russians there. The Russians are claiming that Ukrainians are amassing troops. There's still that claim yesterday. That the Ukrainians are amassing troops up here somewhere, and then they always have this claim that they're amassing troops around here as well. So whether we will see those troops pushed for some kind of major offensive, we're yet to see. Anyway, thanks so much for your support. As I said, I probably won't be able to produce an extra video today, but any kind of support the channel by liking, subscribing, sharing, and please go and give love to my ATP Geo channel. This video today is on my normal channel, but by the end of this week or sometime very soon, all of these Frontline updates will be on ATP Geo. So please go and subscribe over there. Anyway, thanks so much. See you later. Bye-bye.